The streets of London were slick with rain, and the glow of the street lamps reflected like silver ribbons across the pavement. Inside his flat in Kensington, Oliver stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie for the third time. Everything about the night ahead seemed normal, but he knew it wouldn't be. Not tonight. For months, he had sensed the subtle shifts. Charlotte, his wife of 7 years, had become distant. She laughed less at his jokes, lingered on her phone for just a little too long, and somehow Daniel, his best friend since childhood, was suddenly everywhere she was. It wasn't paranoia. He had proof. Small things at first, fleeting messages, half-hidden smiles, coincidences that stacked too perfectly. And then more, late-night texts, long coffee breaks, and stories that didn't add up. Oliver had watched silently, gathering evidence, watching patterns emerge like a map he alone could read. He knew one thing for certain. Charlotte was betraying him, and Daniel was complicit. Oliver spent the weeks leading up to the new year acting normal. To the outside world, he laughed, joked, and smiled. To Charlotte, he was polite, pleasant, even affectionate, but every word was measured, every gesture intentional. He cataloged everything, every glance shared between Charlotte and Daniel, every suspicious message, every whispered conversation, every subtle way they excluded him, as if he had become invisible. But he did not react. Not yet. Impulsiveness would ruin everything. Revenge, Oliver knew, needed patience. It needed precision, silence, and elegance. He planned the dinner in his mind like a chess game, where everyone would sit, how the candles and lighting would cast shadows on faces, which words he would say to let the evidence speak for itself. The goal was clear: expose them publicly, humiliate them subtly, and reclaim control, all without losing his composure. On December 31st, Oliver woke early. He went through his morning routine mechanically, his mind racing through the night's plan. Charlotte moved around the flat, radiant and unaware, her smile genuine to everyone else, but now hollow to him. During breakfast, he made small, careful comments, innocuous enough not to raise suspicion, but enough to remind Charlotte that he was watching, noticing, aware. Her eyes flickered for a moment, a tiny crack, but she quickly smiled and looked away. Oliver's silence was a weapon. His calmness unnerved them both. Daniel was a childhood friend, someone he had trusted implicitly. But even Daniel now made mistakes. He lingered too long, stumbled over words, avoided eye contact. Oliver cataloged it all. The ride to the family home was quiet. The tension in the car was palpable, though Charlotte did not speak of it. Oliver kept his face neutral, staring out at the rain-soaked streets. Every pause, every silence was intentional. He wanted her to feel a subtle unease, to know that he was aware of everything. By the time they arrived, Oliver had rehearsed every detail in his mind. He knew exactly how he would sit, how he would speak when he would plant the first seeds of doubt, and how he would ensure the entire family would witness the truth. The house was warm, filled with the smells of roast, pudding, and mulled wine. Family members laughed, poured drinks, and exchanged hugs. Charlotte smiled at everyone, a mask of normalcy that made Oliver's stomach tighten, not with rage, but with cold determination. He observed carefully the subtle leaning toward Daniel during conversation, the quiet glances and shared jokes meant only for each other, her cold detachment from him, as if he were a stranger at the table. Every detail, every motion strengthened his resolve. The stage was set. The guests were unaware of the storm gathering at the heart of their celebration. Oliver sipped his wine slowly, letting the moment stretch, letting Charlotte feel the invisible tension. He didn't speak yet. He didn't need to. The game of silence had already begun. He allowed himself a small, almost imperceptible smile. Everything was ready. The night would end with the truth exposed, and he would watch, calm and composed, as the facade of trust and loyalty collapsed. The dining room was warm, filled with laughter, the clink of cutlery, and the golden glow of candles reflecting off the polished table. The smell of roasted turkey, fresh bread, and spiced pudding filled the air. Outside, London's streets were wet and dark. the city preparing for midnight celebrations. Inside, however, a storm was quietly brewing. Oliver sat at the head of the table, Charlotte on his right, Daniel on her right. From the beginning, he observed everything. The way Charlotte laughed at Daniel's jokes, the way Daniel leaned closer when she spoke, the flickers of unspoken communication between them. To everyone else, it was just a family dinner. To Oliver, it was the stage of reckoning. Oliver didn't confront them immediately. He knew that overt anger would ruin the moment. Instead, he began planting subtle hints, testing reactions. Daniel, you must be the expert on wine now. Charlotte mentioned the one you picked last week. Daniel froze for a fraction of a second before responding with a forced smile. Funny, Charlotte, I never realized you and Daniel have such similar taste in everything, Oliver added lightly. Charlotte's cheeks flushed ever so slightly, and she shifted in her seat. The family continued chatting, oblivious to the tension, but the air between Oliver, Charlotte, and Daniel thickened. It was a quiet war, each word a calculated move. As dinner progressed, Oliver's calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the visible discomfort of Charlotte and Daniel. Every glance exchanged between them seemed almost desperate, as though they were silently asking each other, "Does he know?" Oliver let his gaze linger on both of them, slow and deliberate, his silence like a scalpel. He knew that fear, guilt, and the anticipation of exposure would work better than shouting or accusation. He started sprinkling more pointed, but still innocent, remarks. I was surprised Charlotte knew so much about that restaurant. Daniel, were you involved? I hear you two were at the same concert last weekend. What a coincidence. Each remark caused micro-reactions, a stiffening of posture, a sudden clearing of the throat, a subtle flick of the eyes. Oliver cataloged them silently, his plan moving closer to completion. When the clock neared 11:59, Oliver stood, glass in hand, commanding the attention of the room without raising his voice. A new year is always a time for reflection. He began, his tone calm and steady. A time to consider who we are, who we trust, and who has betrayed that trust. Charlotte's smile faltered. Daniel's hand twitched slightly over his glass. The room quieted, curious, confused. Oliver raised his glass a little higher. Sometimes the people closest to us, the ones we think we know best, are not always what they seem. And sometimes those betrayals are hidden in plain sight. He paused. Everyone held their breath. Then, with deliberate calm, he unlocked his phone and placed it on the table, screen visible. Messages, photos, conversations. The proof of Charlotte and Daniel's affair displayed for the family to see. The room fell silent. Forks paused midair. Eyes widened. Aunts gasped. Uncles looked between each other, trying to process what they were witnessing. Charlotte's face drained of color. Daniel stammered, tried to explain himself, but the evidence was undeniable. Oliver did not raise his voice, did not yell. His calm presence amplified the shame and fear. I had hoped we could start the new year together, with trust, Oliver said softly. But some people cannot keep their promises. The family watched as Charlotte and Daniel crumbled under the weight of exposure. Whispers spread across the table. Everyone realized the extent of the betrayal. Oliver sat back down, serene. His revenge was complete. The power of the moment wasn't in chaos, yelling, or confrontation. It was in silence, observation, and timing. The betrayal had been laid bare, elegantly, and without losing dignity. As the clock struck midnight, fireworks erupted outside, but inside, Oliver felt a quiet triumph. He had reclaimed control, exposed the deceit, and remained composed while the guilty parties faced the consequences. Charlotte and Daniel would never forget this night, the New Year's dinner where their lies were unmasked in front of everyone. And Oliver? He had proven that patience, strategy, and quiet observation were far more powerful than impulsive anger. The New Year's fireworks boomed outside, but inside the house, a different kind of explosion had already occurred. Charlotte and Daniel sat side by side, faces pale, eyes darting, completely exposed before the entire family. Their whispers and stammered excuses were futile. The evidence on Oliver's phone had already spoken for itself. Oliver, calm as ever, sipped his champagne and let the tension settle. To everyone else, he was composed, dignified. To himself, he felt the weight of months of betrayal slowly lifting. The family was still processing. His parents exchanged worried glances, siblings murmured behind their hands, and aunts and uncles whispered in disbelief. Charlotte tried to speak, to explain, but the room was heavy with silence and judgment. I can explain, Charlotte stammered, but no one wanted to hear excuses that Daniel's hand shook, the once confident childhood friend now reduced to guilt and fear. Oliver let them squirm. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His silence was his weapon, and the family's shocked attention amplified every micro-expression of guilt and shame from the two. In the days following the dinner, the consequences were unavoidable. Charlotte and Daniel were socially isolated in the family circle. Invitations ceased. Conversations stopped. The warmth they once commanded evaporated overnight. Daniel, who had been confident and charming, became awkward, defensive, and embarrassed at every family gathering. Charlotte, usually poised and self-assured, now carried the weight of public shame, avoiding eye contact, her laughter hollow. Oliver, meanwhile, rebuilt his own life quietly. He focused on himself. Work became more fulfilling. Colleagues respected him for his calm composure and clear-minded approach. Family relationships grew stronger. He had reclaimed trust and admiration from relatives who had long seen him as a loyal, dependable figure. Most importantly, he regained inner peace, no longer carrying the stress and uncertainty of betrayal. Weeks later, Oliver and Charlotte were alone in the flat. No arguments, no shouting, just the cold reality of what had happened. Charlotte, broken and remorseful, attempted to speak. Oliver, he held up a hand. There's nothing to say, he replied, his voice calm. The truth has spoken. You've already faced the consequences. There was no reconciliation. There was no begging. Just the quiet understanding that betrayal has a price, and some bridges, once burned, are never crossed again. Oliver walked to the window and looked out at the London skyline. The city sparkled, oblivious to his personal victory and private pain. He allowed himself a small, almost imperceptible smile. The affair was over. The betrayal was exposed, and Oliver had triumphed, not through rage, but through patience, intelligence, and silent strategy. Oliver knew one thing with certainty. Revenge was not about humiliation or anger. It was about control, dignity, and timing. The perfect revenge isn't loud. It's devastating precisely because it's unexpected and unshakable. Charlotte and Daniel had underestimated him, as so many do when they think deceit can remain hidden. But Oliver had seen the truth, waited for the right moment, and executed a plan that left nothing for them to hide behind. The new year had begun, not with chaos, but with clarity. For Oliver, it was the start of something new, a life reclaimed, a self-respect restored, and a silent victory that no one could take away.